Welcome, Team Harvard. Welcome to Michael Conniff's 50 by 50 podcast series. Judy Graham and I, fellow classmates, Bob Rowley, fellow classmates, are welcoming Michael because he's done all of these 50 by 50 podcasts. And we both asked him separately, shouldn't somebody be interviewing you as well? You've done 30 of these things and more to come. So with that, his fellow classmates insisted that he do this as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Judy for the first question.
And Bob, ever the gentleman and my former editor of the Chicago Tribune, thank you. Mike, we've learned a lot about you during these podcasts.
Yes.
I like to jump in with all kinds of comments, some expected, many unexpected. So one of the themes that comes up over and over again is you say that you fundamentally identify as a writer. Tell me about that. And what does it mean? When did you start thinking of yourself that way? And I'm interested in how your father might have shaped that interest of yours.
Yeah, no, my favorite question to answer. And thanks you both for doing this. I feel very honored to have two distinguished journalists from a paper that would never have hired me in a million years doing this. So thank you.
But you wrote for it.
You, Bob.
You wrote stories for it.
I wrote a couple stories. But thanks. It's I'm happy to talk about that. So I am a writer on both sides. My dad was a terrific newspaper columnist for the old New York Journal American, and then later a syndicated columnist. And he won a Pulitzer Prize in '55 for 1 year after I was born, for interviews he and William Randolph-Hearst Jr. and a guy named Joseph Kingsbury Smith did with Khrushchev and the Soviet leadership when they went to Russia. Bob, you'll appreciate this as a foreign correspondent. Khrushchev was not officially in power. When they left 2 weeks later, he was. And my father said he knew that Khrushchev had taken over because he had told them no interruptions, which meant there was nobody in the Soviet Union who could interrupt the thing. But he was an inspiration for sure. But he was also a fantastic writer of a certain style, right? So for my senior thesis at Harvard, I did his career, which I called the making of an anti-communist, because he was he was an ally of Joe McCarthy, actually. And I had to kind of come to grips with that. But it also meant I got to read everything, he had written pretty much, got to see it all. And I think that had a big effect on me as a writer. On my mother's side, my Uncle Jack, John F. Murray, was a novelist, was a really acclaimed short story writer in the New Yorker, where Roger Angell edited him. He was a really fantastic writer. He was also manic depressive, which runs through my family. He actually had a published story in the New Yorker of the time. He tried to kill himself and failed. And he got a hell of a story out of it, but as I like to say, a very difficult way to get material. but my brother Tony teaches teaches songwriting and storytelling. My brother Frank's published many books. He's a comedian. He's done TV shows, all sorts of things. I've got a cousin who, James Vanderbilt, who wrote one of the Spider-Man, Independence Day. He just did that movie, Nuremberg. He wrote and directed that movie. He's like the next generation. So there's writers all over the place. And in fact, there are two other cousins right now who are writing books about my mother's family. And my mother's family, she came from something that's known as the Murray McDonnell clan. And there have been two books written about her family, Real Lace and Golden Plan, which are both were New York Times bestsellers, actually. And that family is my main fictional inspiration. So that's a pretty long-winded answer, but we writers could go on about this for a while.
Two follow-ups. Number one is, when did you start writing, and what does writing mean to you? And second is, can you tell me about something called the super novel?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked about the supernova. um, um, well, I always, as editor of the high school paper, but my father died while I was in high school, actually, and the headmaster of Canterbury School put the first edition I edited with my friend John Kiernan, with our mutual friend John Kiernan, into his casket, literally where he was buried. And on his grave in Danbury, Connecticut, it has his name in one word, newspaper man. So he was really a newspaper man. But I started to write. I knew it. I knew it my senior year in college. I started to write for the Independent, and I was really, I don't know if you guys had this, but I had this moment where the words were there for me. I don't know quite how to describe it, but it felt natural, and the words were there. Now the super novel is sort of my whole last act. I hope if I live to see it. But the idea there is to write, to invent the future of storytelling using all the media and all the genres. And I've been trying to do that with the Book of O'Kells for like 30 years. I've also kept something called the super novel, a journal of the super novel, which is now 120,000 pages long. And I could have saved myself a lot of time and just waited for AI to come along, because essentially I'm kind of describing AI. There's no AI, so you can't do anything. I'm saying, I got to get a camera, I got to get a microphone, I got to get all, to do these things. But I'm hoping that all the, the writing and work I've done, particularly the fiction, I can, I'm scared of AI, but I'm going to embrace it wholeheartedly in terms of, for my creative life. So yeah, it sort of has all led up. Now, just one other thing I want to add to this, because it'll sort of make it all make sense. My grandfather ran the Associated Press Bureau in Danbury in the 1920s. Okay, with a megaphone. He would come out with a megaphone and say and tell people like what was going on in the World Series. That was the state of the art, right? But he lost his job when the papers went from Morse code to teletype. He got laid off. Fast forward to my dad. He was editor of the World Journal Tribune, which is long forgotten, but represented 14 newspapers that had once existed in New York. It was the largest afternoon paper in the country. Just to give you an idea of the amount of talent they had, the Sunday magazine was New York Magazine. That's where New York Magazine came from. And the staff writers were Tom Wolfe and Jimmy Breslin. Okay, so this was an amazing paper, but it folded after 8 months. My father, this is the big headline. My father.
I think we have to move on here. I'm going to cut you off a little bit.
Just not quite yet. Not quite yet.
Not quite yet? Okay.
Okay, because I'm getting to the punchline. And so the punchline is that my dad had a stroke the day the newspaper folded. So I had both my never worked again. So I had both my grandfather and my father losing their jobs to technology. And as I got out of college, I was like, no matter what happens to me, I am never going to be obsolete. That is not going to happen to me. And that's driven almost everything I've done since. Sorry.
I'm very glad that I didn't cut you off.
Yeah. So may I follow up? Yeah. First of all,
for those who else off, so you might as well cut me off. That's fine.
That's okay. When I did a panel that Judy put together, I think for our 25th or our 40th, and she cut me off too because I went on too long. So she's a tough taskmaster, but a great moderator. I want to pursue the journalism line for a while here. First of all, for our listeners, Judy Graham and I were both at the Chicago Tribune for many years. At one point, we worked together closely when she was the national correspondent based in Colorado, and I was the national editor. We overlapped. She went on to a very further distinguished career writing about healthcare issues and elderly issues for the Times and for other places. I went into academia, and I teach journalism now. I write occasionally for the Chicago Tribune still, and I take students down to Springfield every other week to the Capitol to do local and state news, to plug the holes of what was once a 50 correspondent press corps that's down to 15 or 20 people now. So I'm interested in going back to, you led us up through your family to journalism, and I know that that was the dawn of one of the dawns of your career. So tell us about your college view of journalism, what you wanted to do when you came out, and how that evolved. Because unlike Judy and I, you evolved beyond journalism. But I want to hear about your early career first.
Well, when I at Harvard, so what was a funny thing about the way I went when I went to Harvard, the last thing I wanted to do was work on the Crimson. Like you could not have paid me to work on the Crimson. My whole life had been newspapers. I had grown, it was in my blood. I had grown up with it. One of my dad's best friend was a legendary figure named Toots Shore. I don't know if you've heard that name, but he was a legendary saloon keeper, and I called him Uncle Toots. That's how close he was. But I knew I was not going to do newspapers in college. So it took my last year, 5 years later, in my last year after taking a year off, I finally did newspapers and really liked it, as it turned out. But once, and also I had another advantage, which was that I was the son of a really prominent, my dad was a really prominent Hearst executive. In fact, Bob, he had the same title as you. He was national editor of Hearst newspaper. When he passed away, I still had the contacts, and the contacts were like William Randolph Hearst Jr., right? So I immediately got, ushered into the Baltimore News American right after college, right at that first summer, and then immediately got hired at the Boston Herald American, which was kind of in the midst of a makeover under an editor named Bill McElwain. And so I was incredibly lucky for nepotism, because you know what they say, go work at City News Bureau in Chicago or go work at some small paper, right? And
which I did, by the way. I went to City News when I left the hallowed halls of Harvard.
But, the funny thing about that also, all of us, I think, is that moment when we got into journalism after school was in the post-Watergate blush of that was a prestigious job at the time. I mean, people were really, we were looked up to for about 5 minutes, and then it all went to hell. In many different ways. But I remember when I started, I was really, and I still am, but not only was I proud of being a newspaper man, but it was a prestigious thing to be those days. Yeah. So that's it. But I got out of it, Bob, because at the end of, one little parenthetical thing is I was treasurer of the labor union at the Herald. So that was also like a great experience. But I got out of it because I thought newspapers had no future, and this was 1979. So I left the business, and I was about 30 years, 20 years early. But I was right. But as usual, I was way too early.
And my follow up is what happened next after that. You and I reconnected in your Vermont years, which were a little bit later, sometime later.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what happened? So thing I'm really proud of, I was the first person ever hired in new media at NBC. That was a big thing for me. Then I went to American Express and Interactive Services. But I could not hold a job. I've never been able to hold a job. So I started my own consulting firm, which is great because nobody could fire me really. If they did, I just went on to the next job. So for 10 years I did that. So remember, this is 80 to 95. 95 is when the browser and the web happened. So for those 15 years, it's like the dark ages. It's like, it was slow, but it couldn't jump. There wasn't enough bandwidth. There wasn't enough storage. There wasn't enough resolution. So I would help companies, try to deal with that. And come up with products. I did some real interesting stuff. I did Reuters TV Reuters, the adjective, Reuters TV 2000. I did something called Citicorp Global Report, which was actually the first online news service aimed at end users. So that was in 81. That was a really long time ago, and it was actually profitable. So it was like a very rare profitable service. And so I did various jobs, and then, and so everything went kind of swimmingly, career-wise. And it was part of what I, considered like having a really fast start to my career. getting into something early, like online and technology, and then kind of hit the wall very quickly for about the next 30 years when I became an entrepreneur.
But just the follow-up question, and then it's Judy's turn. What made you realize so early in '79 that disruptive technology was on the horizon? Because it really was. The internet we were using in the '80s. We were using email. We didn't know it was email. We would use newscom.com to send things, which was a company that we hired, but we didn't really know it as email even then. So in the
Yeah.
early '80s, how did you discern, or what made you think there was disruptive technology coming that would disrupt the newspaper business?
When I was at the Herald, I taught another thing I'm really proud of. I taught XPOS. I went back to Harvard and I taught XPOS for a year, and I got my part of that was getting my students word processing accounts at the Science Center. So all my students were word processing, and this would have been 79, 80. And so even then I was thinking about it, and it's real simple for me, and it's still very much like this. It's like a hands-on phenomenon, because as a writer, I wanted to be able to move paragraphs around. I wanted to be able to change things. I wanted to be able to edit, right? And it was just so hard with a typewriter to do anything.
Yeah.
So it was really driven by that. And ironically, now I've gone back to writing with a pen. So there you have it. But everything I've done in technology to this day has been wanting to get my hands on what I need to do what I'm what I'm thinking about or what I think could happen. Yeah. So yeah. So anyhow, what I ended up after that doing two long not big companies, but companies that took up a lot of time. Interactive sports was bringing sports was analog this was in 1990. So sports is completely an analog business, VHS, tape, and cameras. And my company, Interactive Sports, brought digital technology to the teams, and we also brought fan marketing and database marketing to the teams. And then after that, when I moved to Colorado, I started an early blogging company called Aspen Post, and we actually did. I say I wish I had really understood how well we did at the time, because at the time it just felt like a slog. But we got up to 50,000 unique monthly visitors in a town of 6,000. We had multiple blogs, and at one time I had registered 1,000 domains with the word "post" in them. So my hope was which I never accomplished. I'm now helping a company that's sort of doing exactly this and doing it successfully, but I never really pulled it off. I couldn't, and it's the same thing that media companies are struggling with now, not having the right business model. And what one just little footnote about that, Bob, because when I became a consultant, I worked with a guy named Hal Logan who had just left the Washington Post. I was at a consulting firm, and he was the expert on electronic classifieds. So this firm was electronic yellow pages and online classifieds. And so we spent all our time thinking about what's going to replace, how that's going to work. What do you know that nobody, even this really smart guy, Hal Logan, ever put his hand up and said, well, somebody's going to come along and give it away for free. And that's what happened. That's Craigslist, yeah. Right? And yep. Craig Newmark is now giving away hundreds of millions of dollars, but basically that was 40% of the revenue for a newspaper. The agate print, right? Those page
classified ads. That's what did us in, or one of the things that did us in.
Yeah.
The loss of classified ads.
Yeah, but no, I really think that was the biggest one. Then there was all the digital dimes versus print dollars happened, and lots of other things happened. But there aren't many businesses that can survive without if you just take away 40% of their revenue that went straight to the bottom line. So I think that's the original sin, actually.
Yep.
So I'm going to pivot back to the personal for a while. I have a feeling we're going to go back and forth. Bob and I did not arrange anything in advance. We're doing this on the fly. So you've asked lots of people on these podcasts what they took from Harvard and how it changed them. Let me ask you that question.
it you Judy, you and I talked about taking a year off, and when I first got to Harvard, the first year was really tough for the same reason it's tough for a lot of people. But I had, my father had passed away when I was a junior in high school. At the end of my freshman year, my best friend died at Stanford, just completely out of the blue in a bicycle accident. He was an all-American golfer. He was, I love that guy. His name was Bob Steele. And so I was in a very precarious place emotionally. And I decided to go to California. And I ended up becoming friends and hung out a lot with his friends. So I ended up becoming really good friends with his friends from Stanford. And also, I needed a job. So the only person I knew in California was William Randolph Hearst Jr. And so he got me a job as a copy boy at the San Francisco Examiner. I get hired. 2 weeks later, Patty Hearst is kidnapped. So my whole experience is the Patty Hearst story. So the biggest story in the country was right in the newsroom, which was amazing. Her father was publisher of the Examiner at the time, Randolph Hearst. So anyway, so when I came back, I felt I don't know how to explain this, but I sort of felt like I belonged, and I think that's what I took from Harvard was this feeling that I wasn't an imposter, that I didn't have I wasn't the smartest. I didn't have the skills because, people are so smart there. I didn't have the same set of skills they did. One of my good friends was, I came from Canterbury with him to Harvard, John Kiernan. He's still like the smartest guy I've ever met. So yes. I wasn't going to be the smartest, but that was okay. I sort of made my peace with that. I got really involved in the Institute for Politics. That was a real savior for me. And I just kind of settled in. I didn't do anything particularly outstanding at Harvard, or I wasn't a standout at all. The funny story of when I graduated was Al Heimer at Eliot House. So Jim Cramer's right in front of me, the Cramer from CNBC, Jim Cramer. And Eimer.
He was managing editor of the Daily in our era.
Yeah.
Not the Daily, the Crimson, sorry.
He hated Cramer. So he said he just insulted him and then handed him his diploma. So I'm the next guy. And so Heimer, who was a big, fat, loud guy, he's just warming up. Oh, here comes Michael Conniff. Now, he mispronounces my name, but I ended up changing my pronunciation, so that was right. So he goes, Michael Conniff. He has a promising career ahead of him as a fiction writer. And I'm thinking to myself, I've never written any fiction. What? And he was talking about, I had written an expose of Eliot House for the Independent. And so he was referring to that as fiction.
Right?
But
he was the head of the English department too, Heimer, at the time we were there.
Yeah, right. So I ended up having a career as a fiction writer, which he would never, so he kind of predicted that by accident. But
by accident.
Yeah. But what I took from Harvard, just to come around on that question, is that, I don't know if it's been like this for you, but, Harvard is such a ticket to ride. I mean, people just assume you can do it, or they assume like you're not going to screw it up, or they assume you should be in the room. Right. And to me, that goes for like any room, because of the Harvard thing. And to me, that's just been, I know that now when people look me up on LinkedIn, and I've got a long LinkedIn, but, I know they notice the Harvard thing. I know that's why they'll talk to me. I know it. And so I think that's what I took from it, Judy. I took that the press pass and the Harvard pass, and that's kind of how I entered the world, the adult world.
And it sounds like a sense of belonging. So what has belonging to our class, what has doing all these interviews meant for you? What have you learned from these interviews?
I've learned that we are a community. We are together. There's a togetherness to us that I would have maybe guessed at, but but I think it's really palpable. I think that, I actually graduated in 77. I could have easily said, I'm class of 77. I never for a minute thought I was anything but 76. And I can't even explain that to you. And, I think also, I mean, I'm proud of the people I've talked to. I mean, I think pretty much without exception, they've done, remarkable stuff, and they're, in many cases continuing to do remarkable stuff. But, what I think what I learned also is that there's a real level of service that people have that I would not have guessed. I mean, we're children of, you know what I learned? We're children of the 60s. And it's easy to forget that because we graduated almost late, mid 70s, right? We're the bicentennial class, but really that was the 60s, right into up until 75 when the Vietnam War ended. I consider that the 60s. I think the 60s was Beatles to Vietnam War. So in any event, I think that I think it's also, Judy, the quality of the people is kind of remarkable. And not everybody hit a home run, but everybody really made something of their lives, and I think that's really, really cool. I think if you and I think that's Harvard. I think that there's the expectation, and Jeff Moley, the late Jeff Moley, who I've mentioned several times in the podcast, Jeff had said this. He said, Harvard teaches you to be a heavyweight. Now, you may not want to be a heavyweight. You may not go in that direction, but it does teach you to do that if that's what you want. And it teaches you that you belong in that, you can belong in that conversation. So we have so many examples of that. Robert Kraft, John Kiernan, you two, people who, just really kind of hit it out of the park. And so for me, it's like, I sense the community of it. I'm already trying to do deals with a couple of people, so it's really neat. And the other thing is it brings it back, doesn't it? It brings it all back.
It really does. And when you're talking, Michael, just following up on this,
Yeah.
You stayed in touch with a lot of our classmates more than many of us did. The podcasts are an example of that. The people you reached out to, the people who knew you, and many who didn't. So it's also an opportunity to network. I also think of the milestones that were, our class represented. Women in the Yard for the first time. And as you said, coming out of the 60s, we were protesting the Vietnam War just as we got into college. And it was just ending. Pieces at Hand was, I think, the on the front page of the Kremlin, the Crimson, one day when we were there. Well, literally one day, I think the fall we were there. I remember the headline in the Crimson. So
Yeah.
there were lots of tumultuous things that shaped us as well. And I think a lot of people went into business and law, and a lot went into medicine, and a lot went into the arts and the writing and movies and other things. So you stayed in touch with them. What is that one of the things you carry with you? This networking sense of bonding with people in our time, in our class?
That's funny. I don't feel like I stayed in touch with that many. I mean, the people, John Dorfman has been a great friend, Charlie Smith. But I just talked to Joel Feldman. We hadn't talked in, 30 plus years. Bob, you and I were out of touch for a while. I did, anyway, I don't think I'm especially connected, though. Now I'm hoping maybe I hope that what comes out of that is that people stay in touch, obviously, right? That would be great that, and there's been a lot of that kind of, it's sort of like a switchboard where there's a the old switchboard operator takes a plug and plugs it into here and then goes like this. And it's like suddenly these people are talking again. I have a theory about this, that because we have so many ways to be in touch, texting, email, phone, WhatsApp, go down the list, so many ways to stay in touch, we don't. Like, for the most part, we don't communicate because I could pick up the phone at any time over the last 30 years and talk to anybody, right? But a lot of times you don't do it. You don't talk to them, and you kind of kick yourself at a certain point, particularly if you hear somebody, passed away. And then you're like, oh, geez, I wish I had done more. but I
It's
think,
almost like you need a reason, and this anniversary gives us that reason.
yeah, and not only that, Bob. I think the other part of it is, you know, this is the last time we're going to get together. For all intents, I'm not saying nothing, no 60th or whatever, but for all intents and purposes, this is the last one. This is the last dance, right?
I just wrote to somebody today or yesterday, let's not wait until 60, because he turns out he can't make the reunion. And I said, let's not wait till the 60th. Let's see each other before then.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I hear you.
But it's, it's hard to do that, and it's hard to stay in touch, and it's going to be harder, as we, age and have, health issues. You've probably given this some thought, Judy, as well. I mean, it's like, you never know, like what the next problem's going to be, the organ recital, you call it, Bob.
Yeah.
But so there's some, for me, I've had a great time in my 70s. I've really, I feel like I started fast, but I feel like I'm ending really fast too. Like, I feel like a lot of things have come together for me, that maybe held me back. And I think that's exciting to me. When people tell me they're retired, I don't know what to say. There's not much to say.
Wait, I'm retired. There's plenty to say.
Okay.
Travel, family, all those things, right?
Yes. But
it's not, our lives are not all about work.
Bob, you and I have worked together. That's true. Obviously. But, Bob and I have worked together on something called the Foreign Press Correspondence Association. But I say that just because, and Judy, we've spent a bit of time together, and, we just have so much gas in our tank. And Judy, your husband, I think Jeff's going to keep working, it sounds like, at least for a little while further. But anyway, I'm just talking for me. Everybody makes their own decision. But for me, it's like, with this super novel, with the AI, I just feel like I'm getting started. I know that's crazy, but that is.
No, it's not. It's not. I have to say that I did retire in 2020 as COVID was coming on, and then I went back to work 4 years later, the Medill School of Journalism. I flunked retirement, and it's insane. But every year I was retired, I did more. Michael, you got me in touch with the Association of Foreign Correspondents, of which I'm now the vice president, advocating for those journalists from other countries who are here. I joined a bunch of boards. I started writing more again. I continue to teach, and I was just as busy. So I completely suck at it. So I took a full-time job.
Bob, sorry to interrupt, but let me point out that Judy and I were going to go ahead without you because you're so busy, and just showed up literally at the last second, like a true like a city news reporter. You showed up when you had to at the last minute.
And
I personally don't want, as somebody who wrote a column on aging for 8 years, I don't want anybody who listens to this podcast, to feel that if in fact they stopped working, if in fact they slow down, if in fact they don't fill their days with busyness, that somehow they're doing something wrong. They're not.
Absolutely.
That may be a choice that some people make. And Mike, your choice, it sounds like you've come into a time of life where you feel even more yourself than you have for a while. And I wanted to ask about that because one of the personal questions I have for you is, you mentioned offhandedly that you married your high school girlfriend 35 years later. So yeah. I wanted to hear that story of whether you had never forgotten her, how the two of you got together, and whether that is part of finding this new sense of security in yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So I never forgot her. She broke up with me in college. She went to she was a little bit younger, went to Dartmouth, and I don't think I ever got over it, to be honest with you. And my sophomore year was just a black hole, literally depression. And if it happened in this, in this era, I would have, if there were medication, I would have taken it. You know what I mean? It was just really, I don't know if either of you have had depression. it's indescribable what it is. But it's the black hole you can't crawl out of, and every time you dig yourself deeper. So it's really really rough, and that was because I broke other reasons, but the trigger was when I broke up with her, and so she went her Joan McGivern, she went her own separate way, and she was literally the girl next door. We grew up on East End Avenue. She was on 84th. I was on 88th. We met at her school dance where my brother was playing in a band, and I was just there was a line of 14-year-olds. She was 14, and she was the tallest and the prettiest, and so I asked her to dance, and so that was the best decision of my life right there. But she for some reason, Judy, she felt like maybe she wanted to meet other people before before she called it a day with marriage. So she did, and she had her own family.
Well, I have to admit.
Judy, I am in a really rare cohort in our class. I've actually been married 3 times. So what happened with Joan is I reached out to her on LinkedIn about 10 years ago, thinking like she's just going to blow me off, and she didn't.
I assume
And
you weren't married at this point, Mike.
I'm sorry.
I assume you weren't married at this point.
I have to say that's a no comment.
Okay. All right.
That's the story's pretty complicated, but
Okay.
long story short, when we saw each other, it was instantaneous. It was like we had never left off. And then I ended up moving out here to her. She lives in her family house here in East Hampton, and about a year later, we eloped. And in the immortal words of her mother, who was in her late 80s at the time, she said, "You eloped? Why didn't you tell us?" I said, "Not elope, don't you understand?" But yeah, but I'm gonna tell you very succinctly is that the difference is that even when we were younger. Now remember, I had just graduated from high school. I'm going to Harvard, and she's dating this Harvard guy, right? So you wonder about Harvard. That helped, but that helped me get me in the door anyway. But she believed in me. It's kind of that simple. I mean, I think I've had spouses who, multiple, who didn't believe in me, loved me anyway, loved me even though they thought I was a failure. That's literally how I would put it. And I never felt like a failure. I never felt like it was over for me. But I had many failures, especially in business. None of those businesses, they were incredible experiences, but I wasn't able to exit from them successfully. So basically when I left that consulting firm to go become an entrepreneur, it was like 25 years of hell trying to make these companies work and not really succeeding. But she still believed in me. And so when I came out here, I've taken this turn from I'm still writing every day. I'm finishing up what I think is going to be my last novel about conspiracy theory, and that's a lot of fun. But I was able to unexpectedly make a turn into finance, which is just about like the most random thing for me. I can't even balance my checkbook. I literally still, after 5 years, know nothing about finance, but I'm in finance. What I know about what's interesting, what's maybe valuable is that, is the storytelling. It's the skill we have, all 3 of us have, to look at a company or to look at a situation and say, wow, there's a great story here. And so much of business is storytelling. And so I have actually taught seminars called Storytelling for Startups all over the world. That's been fantastic. But right now I'm not doing that anymore. I'm just focused on helping companies get money. And that's where some networking has come in, Bob. I've been able to sort of build out a network that does that with some success. So, and all of it was sort of actually pretty necessary to have some financial security for Joan and me, at the end of our lives. the con man. Con man, Bob. I am the con man. I'm still the con man. Yeah. Well, the thing that's maybe a little bit different than most in our classes. I've always lived in beautiful places. I lived in Burlington, Vermont for 15 years. I lived in just outside Aspen, Colorado for 13 years. I've been in East Hampton for almost 10 years. I've been in like not only the most beautiful but the whitest uh, the whitest communities in America. It's it so happens. But so in Vermont, I was I was mainly a consultant. Interactive sports got started when I was up there, but I remember thinking my son was about 2 years old. He's now 41. He was about 2 years old, and just thinking like I didn't want him to go to New York schools. So started looking everywhere. Ran into Charlie Smith at our 10th reunion, and he said, "Well, you should look at Burlington. They have everything you need up there. We have everything you need." He was going to move there. He wasn't even there yet. He was coming back, and airfares were $19 on People Express at that moment. So within days, I went up to Burlington. Within 15 minutes, I called my first wife and I said, "This is the place. This is the place." So 15 years later, she got really tired of the weather. Can't blame her. We ended up moving to Naples, Florida, because I said to her, "I'll go wherever you want." Like I was so sick of the complaining about it. So like, I'll go. Now I knew she had good taste. I knew we were going to go to like a really nice place. So it came down to Santa Barbara or Naples. We went to Naples, where she still lives, where my son lives now. And essentially, um, another beautiful place. But I brought my son back with. We got separated down there after 15 years of marriage, and I brought my son back, and so I was a single dad for 3 years in Vermont. So Vermont was like kind of difficult. I had the business wasn't doing great. My son was pretty difficult. They thought he had, everyone wanted to say he had ADHD. He did not. He had ODD, which means you say black, he says white. And he was a tough kid to raise, and very stubborn and opinionated, but a good kid. And so he stayed with me for 3 years, and then he ended up doing high school in Naples. And he's a beach boy now, and that's where he wants to be. But Colorado. Okay, here's talk about turning points. So my interactive sports, has ended my company after 12 years, and I can't get arrested. Like if I heard that I was overqualified one more time, I was gonna like strangle them. Because when you and I was overqualified for a lot of stuff, but like you're applying for the job because you need it. You know what? And so anyway, the pinnacle of this was I ended up with two possibilities. I don't know if I've told you this, Bob, but I interviewed for managing editor of Yahoo, and the other job that I had dangling in front of me was arts and entertainment editor at the Aspen Daily News, which was not even the best newspaper in Aspen. Paper, they have, yeah, but lots of it was actually so. Needless to say, the editor in chief at Yahoo told me I was overqualified, and I was like, I could, right? I could not possibly be overqualified for this. This is like a destination job. It's like I'm not over. Nope, you're overqualified. And then, so I end up going to Aspen. It ends up being a great thing. I wrote I didn't last long on the paper. I got fired from that paper. One of the things the editor, who was from Louisiana, uh, really didn't like about the way I wrote was that I used foreign words, little Latin and French. He said, "Stop using that." He really did not like. And my problem. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I did one story where it was about a guy. Actually, it was about a guy who had an art gallery and was blind. Judy, he was blind, and I did it to try to capture that. I did a story with no verbs, and nobody knew what the bleep I was doing except him. He got it right away. He knew what I was doing because he was an art guy, right? Anyway, yeah, it was an experiment. But anyway, so in Colorado, I ended up changing my name to Conniff. Soon I had a column called Con Games. I got asked to do a radio show. I ended up doing it for 6 years, every day, Monday through Friday, 8 to 10, before Imus and after Rush. After Imus and before Rush, every single day for 6 years. And it was an incredible experience. It was a lot like this, the podcasting. People sort of get to know you in a very interesting way when you're a broadcaster. And and plus I started Aspen Post. I had my own blog. So I sort of had my own little media world that I had created. And the other thing I did there in the entrepreneurial spirit was I created what became the Isaacson School for Communications, Arts, and Media. I was a co-founder of that, and there's still I think over 1,000 students in that program. So I spent some time with Walter. I wouldn't say we're close friends or anything, but he was great. And I said, I actually didn't ask him for any money. I just said, can we use your name? Because he was CEO of the Aspen Institute, and the idea was to bring the rich together, the haves together with this little community college, and it kind of worked out that way. So I was really proud of that. I still am. But Bob, Judy, I also got fired from there. I had raised all the money. I was faculty of the year. It was originally my idea, and I still managed to get fired. When I started that school, I applied for the director of the school. This is a Harvard story. They said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you don't qualify." There's no school without me, right? You don't qualify. I said, "What?" They said, I didn't even notice that. So they say, "Well, you didn't study in a communications program like Northwestern, like where you are, Bob." And I said, "Well, they didn't have journalism at Harvard. They had history." And I had to go through this whole thing of giving them my thesis, which was about my journalist father, and sort of proving to them that. So they let me apply and didn't give me the job, needless to say. So anyway, it was kind of a rough thing, but yeah, that was Colorado. So Colorado was like my whole. It's been the whole thing. It's been a roller coaster. That's. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's nice of you to say that. But Judy, didn't he just editorialize? I thought he was supposed to be a reporter.
No, Bob was on the opinion section, so he has skills. All
But
right, I have a question for both of you. Believe
yeah,
it or not, yes. So we're
yeah.
gonna, but we'll go to Michael first because this is the interview of Michael Conniff, which is
My podcast. The other podcasts are your podcasts.
related to everything you've just been talking about, do you feel you have anything left to prove, either to yourself or the world at large?
Are you kidding? Yes, not I have everything to prove. Most of my stuff is not published. I got to publish it. I'm even looking at buying a publisher. I have so much stuff; it's the only way I'm going to get it all published. And then in terms, my goal for a long time, I do have a bit of an ability to see around the corner a little bit, and my whole goal has been to invent the future of storytelling. And now I really have a chance to do that because the tools are there, right? Whereas 5 years ago, I would have said, I'm just not, I never thought I would live to see it. And then Chat GPT got announced, and the next thing you knew, there's Claude and there's Perplexity and there's endless Anthropic. So the tools are all there waiting for me. I can't believe I'm still alive and I still have a chance to make something of myself, inventing the future of storytelling. And so that's kind of a huge driver for me. So yeah, do I have anything to? I'm not like the people who have, well, except in the sense that I've written all this stuff, 11 novels, 50 short stories, like in the book. That's done. So I'm really happy that I'm not sitting here at age 72 saying, oh, sorry, Bob, don't get mad at me. I, I wish I had written that novel. It's like all I did was write novels, mostly while doing all this other stuff. So, it's kind of being obsessed with the past and equally obsessed with the future. So I think I've got a foot in both camps, and it's been fun. It's more rewarding now than it's ever been. In reality, it was a real struggle. Joel Feldman and I talked about this. It's like, you know, we I didn't have a path. Like I could have been the next Jimmy Breslin. Seriously, I'm not even exaggerating. I was the logical next Jimmy Breslin, but I just didn't want to do it. And so I kind of tried to create my own path, as many in our class have. And that's different than if you're a journalist, you get a job on a great paper, like there's a path. It's a path. You go down a path, and
You
there
still
was
have to create your own path, even in a job like that. Don't
yeah,
you agree, Bob? Yeah. Well, I ask this question of myself every single day. I think what I feel, I'm not interested in creating the future, but what I have, I want to prove to myself that I'm able to give in a meaningful way back, that in a way that I haven't during my working life. And what that looks like is still not entirely clear. There are a lot of things that I've been doing, but it remains a question. Can I give in a way that is meaningful at this particular moment of time? Right?
yeah.
And how best to do that? Okay, Bob, because
Your
we're going
turn,
to.
Bob. Mhm.
And Mike, part of that issue of finding your path, even as a journalist, is which truth is it that you want to tell? Which part of the world do you want to train your eye upon and come to learn about and then bring to a larger public. And that path is not laid out clearly at many levels of journalism. You get to create that path in
And you
terms of
did
what
healthcare. You did
you're
healthcare.
interested.
You did the foreign correspondent. But I've given back quite a bit in my life. I think I'm not totally. I have other ideas about how to do that, but I'm really focused. I'm an artist. Last thing I'd say is, like, people don't who've known me forever don't know I'm actually an artist. Like, that's what I do. I try. I get
Yeah, on your
Well,
okay.
that's okay. We can call it a day. But I was just saying that, like, I'm an artist, and that's the most important thing. And most, even my best friends, don't even know that. Um, so I would leave them with that. It's like, I get up every day, I work on it, I try to create something, and do the best I can.
All right. I'm sorry the echo came in at the end, but Michael said, in case anybody didn't hear, that he identifies as an artist, and that a lot of people don't even know that about him. And creating every day is part of what it means to be an artist. And you've created so much, as Bob noted, during your career. You created companies, you created media forms, you created all kinds of things, and that continues. So it's been a
We
pleasure.
all have. We all, I appreciate that, Bob. Bob, you've been a great advocate for me, and you've kind of understood what I was up to before before most still don't know. But thank you for your fantastic support. You've been a great friend, and I'm so happy we got to know each other even better. Had it's
Yeah,
well. Don't worry, will probably be edited. There's post processing that happens. It'll probably take care of that. And if it doesn't, that's life. So thanks, you guys, both. See you at reunion. Can't wait. And yeah, and thank you so much for doing this. This is a real treat. To be under the microscope. I guess I got what I deserved, and and, yeah,
yes,
multi-fair.
right.
Well, I appreciate that, and I will do more. I am going to get to 50 not by 50, but shortly thereafter. So it's really been a fun project, and thanks you both. Thanks to you both. Really appreciate it. Take care. Bye.